Math in Moto!
Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host as always, Professor Prime. So, welcome back to my Math in the World series. And if you're new here, it is the series where I look at math and different things in the world and how they relate. Some of the videos that I just uploaded not too long ago at the time of recording included things about math and gaming, math and music, then specifically math and rap, math and food, math and exercising, that sort of thing. And I also opened myself up to recommendations. Not saying I'll get to every single recommendation that I'll receive, but I'll definitely consider it and actually look at it. And this video is the first of said recommendations that I've received so far. So this one is on math in Moto. And so I want to talk about my views on how math could be used in that, how it can relate to Moto. And for those maybe not in the know, motocross. And so yeah, I want to get into that, and I hope this changes someone's perspective, or just find something interesting, preferably both. And if you have more to add to the conversation, please do. I welcome it because there might be things that I didn't think about. So on to the show. Okay, so the immediate way that I see math and moto connecting is through physics. Um, which probably isn't a shock. But and I guess that's probably the whole video then, right? But no, I want to talk about more specific things though. So I think the first thing to kind of talk about is when you're into moto, right? It's a physically demanding sport, mentally demanding too. And I guess I want to start with just being on that bike as you race, and then kind of letting that expand. So when you're on that bike and you're racing, the first thing I'm thinking about is, well, you have to be very coordinated. There's math in that. You have to be very balanced, and there's math in that too, right? You have to be constantly shifting and balancing and making sure things don't go south. And you have to be able to have a good sense of your environment and what's around you. You have to have a good sense of the circuit that you're on. You have to have a good sense of your speed. You have to have a good sense of what lap you're on. All of that is key. And so, there's math in all of that and a lot of physics too. And then I'd add that when you're thinking about your equipment, right, you have to think about what that equipment does. Like, does it benefit you? Does it add needless weight, or does it add something crucial to you? And, there's math in that as well. And, you have to know your bike. You have to know that moto, um, right? You have to know the specs. I feel like that helps you. You know how it runs, how it operates, and when you're on it, you get a good sense of how it feels. And to that end, when you're entering a competition, right, you have to know your engine capacity. You have to know where you should be entering, or what type of competition you should be entering. So I feel like all that is pretty key. So I feel like there's also a lot of mental activity involved in that, because you have to have not only a good sense of the circuit that you're in, but the distance as well, right? You have to have a good sense of that. And should something go south, you have to be able to adjust at a moment's notice, and that's not an easy thing. So I'd argue that if you are into moto, you are doing a lot of math whether you realize it or not. And then the crazy thing to me is that, there's a lot of math surrounding you. So if you are out there, right, there's math in your environment, whether it be the petal, sorry, the petals of a flower, or the branches of a tree, there's fractals involved in all of that. And then with a tree, you know, you can get into networks with that too. Because if you look underneath, right, you have the roots and they're underground, and then you're dealing with an entirely crazy network out there. You're dealing with a fungal network. And I am digressing, so I won't spend too much time on that, but just know that it is crazy. Nature pretty much had its own internet way before we ever got here, and that is insane, and you should definitely look into it. It's fundamentally bonkers. But back to the racing. So, I think it's kind of cool to think about just like what goes into the physicality of it and just how much math there is in the physics involved with maintaining your speed, with the mechanics of the bike, with your ability to control that bike. I think that's all amazing. And what you're doing mentally is impressive too if you're out there. And you know, you might not be writing it on a pen and a pad, but you're definitely doing the math. You have to, and you have to be able to do it quick, you know, in an instant. And I think that's kind of crazy. And then if you're into tricks, it's like I feel like that's pretty much on display too, right? Because if you're doing some crazy jump, then you have to know just about where you land. You have to have a firm understanding of, you know, your environment and how your bike works, how fast you're going, and just how crazy things can get with it. So I think all that's pretty impressive. And then like on a larger level, I feel like you can't get around math in that too. So if we're looking like on a more meta level, well, there's a lot of money that goes into it if you're, you know, buying your own stuff, right? And if you're on a budget, you have to figure out, well, how much is this bike going to cost me? How much for the accessories and the equipment? What's going to give me a tactical advantage? So you have to consider all that. And then if, you know, you're doing it professionally and you happen to be indoors, then, you know, there's definitely money in that. Because I assure you, whoever's endorsing you is definitely thinking about money and they're thinking about math as a result. And you know, they're thinking, well, how much are they putting into you, and how does that increase your odds to win? And then you know, you're in, how much are they giving you? How much are you getting out of this deal? And thinking about how things work in a long term. And then even with the networks that you build up, I think there's something to be said about that too. So one of the coolest things I've heard from anyone who's done Moto is that, you know, you end up building a lot of amazing connections. And I always thought that was pretty cool. And so that social network, there's a lot of math in that too, seeing how that branches out. So you can make an argument that when you're making those connections, you're doing math there too. And there's just like a whole lot of logic involved in it. So it's like it's very physical, very mental, and I think there's a lot to be said about that and the math that goes along with it. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else that comes to mind. I guess the only other thing that I could think of at the immediate moment is that, you know, when you're dealing with weather and you have to make adjustments to that, there's a lot of math involved in that. There's a lot of math involved in the weather. So, you know, if you've heard of the butterfly effect or chaos theory, that's often used to predict weather. And so math just surrounds you no matter how you cut it, whether you're talking about you in that race directly or your environment. So I think all of that is pretty cool, and that there's just a lot involved when you're dealing with moto. And I don't think if you're doing it and you're used to it, that you think about like the full amount of crazy things that you're doing. So like more power to you if you're out there and you're racing, because you have to be quick mentally and physically, and you have to be able to adjust. And like I said in the beginning, physically demanding and mentally demanding. So more power to you. And know this before I close this out, because I don't want to get it too long. But know this: you are a natural mathematician. If you don't think that you are, think about some of the stuff that I've said in the video. You're doing it the whole time, whether you're mapping it out on a pen and a pad or not. You're physically doing that math. So yeah, I think that's worth considering. And I hope that this was interesting. And if you're into moto, whether you are a fan or someone who is racing, whether an amateur or a professional, if you have things that you saw math in concerning moto, please feel free to discuss them. Please feel free to let me know. I'd be interested to hear, because I'm guessing that there's probably a lot that I didn't think of. So yeah, that's all I have to say at the immediate moment. I hope you enjoyed. Professor Prime out.